It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon, until the silence turned into a nightmare. I was in the kitchen, fixing a bowl of soup for my daughter when I heard it. That sound, or more precisely, the absence of it, the faint hum of her oxygen tank had stopped. For anyone else, that might have been a relief. For me, it was the sound of death creeping in. "Emma?" I called out, dropping the spoon and rushing toward her room. My hands were trembling before I even turned the doorknob. I don't remember if I opened the door or kicked it in, it's a blur. But I remember what I saw. My daughter, my 9-year-old angel, was slumped sideways in her bed. Her lips were turning blue, her eyes fluttering, and the oxygen mask was still strapped to her face, but it wasn't delivering anything. I leapt forward, yanked the mask off, pressed my fingers to her neck. A pulse weak but there. She was gasping like a fish out of water. The machine was off. The power light was dark. I spun around and looked at the plug, still in. The breaker box? Couldn't be. The house still had lights. TV was on. Kitchen light was glowing. Then I saw it. A handwritten note taped to the wall, right next to the plug. "Some of us need peace and quiet." HOA, I froze. My heart dropped to the floor. It couldn't be. Karen. I grabbed my phone and fumbled to dial 911. My voice cracked as I shouted into the speaker. "My daughter's oxygen machine. Someone turn it off. She can't breathe." They dispatched paramedics instantly. As I cradled Emma in my arms, her breath rattling weakly, I could hear footsteps from the hallway. My wife had just gotten home, dropping grocery bags and screaming the moment she saw us. And then I heard her voice. "Karen," from outside, through our cracked window. "Maybe now they'll learn to keep their medical junk down. We all pay HOA dues, you know." She was talking to someone on the sidewalk, casually sipping her iced tea like nothing had happened. I nearly lost it. I wanted to rush out there, scream, shake her, demand to know what she did. How dare she? But Emma needed me more than my anger did. Within minutes, red and white lights lit up our street. The paramedics stormed in. One of them took one look at Emma and said, "She's crashing. We need to intubate and get her to St. Mary's. Now." As they worked on stabilizing her, the other medic asked about the machine. "You said someone turned it off?" I showed him the note. He read it slowly, then looked at me like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "We're going to need to report this." As they wheeled Emma out, I followed behind, my legs barely holding me up. My wife stayed back to gather things. Before I got into the ambulance, I looked back at our house. And standing across the street, on her perfect little porch with her perfect little smug grin, was Karen. No apology, no shame, just her folded arms and that same cold stare that's haunted us since we moved into the neighborhood. What kind of person turns off a child's oxygen tank just because it's too loud? That night, my daughter almost died because someone decided her right to breathe was less important than their right to silence. This is the story of what happened next, and how we fought back. Before all the chaos, before the sirens and the lawsuits and the media firestorm, we were just a small, tight-knit family trying to hold on to normal. We moved into Willow Creek Estates 6 months ago. A quiet, polished suburban neighborhood lined with blooming cherry trees, smiling joggers, and freshly painted mailboxes. It was supposed to be our safe haven, a fresh start. We chose this place after months of house hunting, not for the prestige, but for the calm. A calm we thought would help Emma heal. Emma was born with a rare respiratory condition, bronchomalacia. Her airways were too soft, too fragile. She'd been in and out of hospitals for most of her childhood, hooked up to machines more often than swings or storybooks. But she never complained. Not once. She wore her oxygen mask like a superhero cape, brave, quiet, beautiful. The doctors said the clean air and quiet environment might help reduce her flare-ups. So we scraped together everything we had and bought a modest single-story home in the heart of the Willow Creek community. At first, it felt like a dream. Emma had her own room for the first time in years. A pink little sanctuary covered in glow-in-the-dark stars and lined with picture books. She named her oxygen tank Mr. Bubbles and even stuck a googly eye on its side to make it look like a robot friend. Every morning, she'd wake up smiling and say, "Me and Mr. Bubbles are ready for adventure." My wife, Rachel, started planting herbs in the backyard. I found a local job that let me work from home so I could stay close in case of emergencies. We enrolled Emma in online classes with a teacher who specialized in children with health issues. For once, life was peaceful. Until Karen arrived. Well, technically, she'd been here long before us. Karen Montgomery, president of the HOA, retired legal assistant, a 60-something woman who wore high heels just to collect her mail. She had the kind of energy that didn't just demand control, it needed it. The first time I met her, I was washing my car in the driveway. She approached with a clipboard in hand and a forced smile plastered across her lips. "Good morning," she chirped, "I my hose. Just a reminder that water usage is restricted to odd-numbered days after 6 p.m. per HOA guidelines. You're number 24. "Oh, thanks," I said, startled. "I didn't realize. I'll wrap it up." Her smile didn't change. "We take the rules seriously here. Keeps the neighborhood beautiful." And with that, she walked off, heels clicking on the pavement like a gavel. I didn't think much of it at the time. Every neighborhood has that one person who's a little too enthusiastic about power, right? But then the notes began. The first one was slid under our front door. "Please consider relocating your daughter's medical machine. The noise is affecting neighboring homes. This is a peaceful community." HOA, my wife nearly tore it in half out of fury. They're talking about the oxygen tank? It was a quiet hum, no louder than a refrigerator. We even had a sound dampening cover around it, recommended by Emma's doctors. I wrote back through the HOA contact email, "This is life-saving equipment for our medically fragile daughter. We've taken all possible noise precautions. Let me know if you'd like to discuss further." No response. Then, a few days later, the letters escalated. Non-compliant equipment may be subject to fine under HOA Rule 3.4, nuisance control. You have 7 days to correct the issue. Continued noncompliance may result in board action. We were stunned. I scheduled a meeting with our family physician to write a medical exemption letter. He wrote, "The oxygen concentrator in use is essential and compliant with federal ADA regulations. Tampering or interference could result in medical emergency or death." I sent that to the HOA, and still no reply. Then came the social isolation. Neighbors stopped waving. People who had once smiled at Emma now avoided eye contact. We noticed whispers, glances. Rachel overheard someone at the corner cafe saying, "It's not fair that one family ruins the peace for everyone else." I began checking the oxygen unit obsessively, twice at night, once before every errand. I even installed a small security camera facing Emma's bedroom window, just in case. One morning, we woke up to find a bright red warning tag taped to our door. Final notice: noise complaint unresolved. Board will conduct compliance inspection within 48 hours. My hands were shaking as I read it. Was this harassment? Discrimination? I started reading up on HOA abuse cases, medical exemption laws, ADA protections. I printed documents. I gathered medical bills. I was ready to defend my daughter with everything I had. And Emma, she tried to stay cheerful through it all, but we saw the way her smile started fading. The way she hesitated to turn on her machine without asking, "Is it okay? Will Karen be mad?" She was just a child, yet she'd learned to fear a woman with a clipboard and a grudge. And then came the night someone silenced Mr. Bubbles, the night my daughter stopped breathing, and everything changed. After Emma came home from the hospital, everything changed. The doctors said it was a miracle we got to her in time. Just 60 seconds later, and her oxygen levels would have dropped beyond recovery. Her brain could have been permanently damaged or worse. The thought still wakes me up at night in a cold sweat. I can't unsee her limp body. I can't unhear the alarms on the monitor as they stabilized her. And I definitely can't forget the smug look on Karen's face when the ambulance drove away from our house. We thought surely now, someone would listen, This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. Someone had physically interfered with our daughter's medical equipment. This wasn't an HOA issue, it was criminal. So we reported it to the police. The officer who came by, Officer Denton, was kind. He took photos of the oxygen unit, the plug, the note taped to the wall. He examined the circuit board and the breaker panel. Looks like someone flipped the outlet from the exterior breaker box. He said, "You've got a sub-panel outside, easy to access if you know the neighborhood well." We did some digging. Turned out HOA board members had keys to the external breaker panels for each house for emergency maintenance. That was standard in the community. We had unknowingly granted that access when we signed the homeowner's agreement. And who was the only one on the board with both keys and a known vendetta? Karen Montgomery. Officer Denton promised to escalate the case, but he warned us gently. Unless we catch someone in the act or get a direct confession, this will be hard to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That was the moment we realized we weren't just up against a woman with a clipboard. We were up against a system that protected her. Still, we tried to take the high road. I printed out new medical exemption letters and distributed them to every house on the block, along with a note that said, "Our daughter Emma uses a life-saving oxygen tank. It is medically necessary and legal under federal disability protection laws. Please let us know if you ever hear excessive noise. We're always open to reasonable discussion." We thought maybe our neighbors didn't realize how serious things were. Only one neighbor responded. A sweet older woman named Gloria left us cookies and a sticky note that read, "Don't let them bully you. Emma is a blessing." The rest? Silence. But Karen wasn't done. The very next HOA meeting, which we attended in person for the first time, turned into an ambush. We walked into the community hall with Emma in her wheelchair. Rachel held her hand while I carried a folder of documents, medical proof, ADA regulations, the whole stack. The room was filled with about 20 residents and the full HOA board-seated behind a folding table. Karen didn't even look at us when we entered. She cleared her throat and began. "Before we open today's meeting, I'd like to bring attention to a continued nuisance complaint regarding excessive equipment noise and safety concerns coming from 24 Willow Lane." That was us. She continued, "We've received multiple anonymous reports of mechanical buzzing and an unsightly external tube connected through a window. These violate our community aesthetics and noise ordinances." I stood up, furious. That unsightly tube is keeping our daughter alive. Some people shifted in their seats. A few looked down, but Karen didn't blink. "We understand your situation, Mr. Lawrence," she said, with that fake sympathy laced in every syllable. "But community guidelines apply to all residents. We've made special allowances already, and you have yet to comply. We've done everything legally required." Rachel snapped, "Federal law protects our right to reasonable medical accommodation. You're not just violating our rights, you're endangering our child." Karen gave a tight smile. "If you believe you're being discriminated against, you're welcome to pursue legal action. But as of now, we are voting on a compliance resolution." And right there, in front of us, she led a vote. 5 board members raised their hands in favor. 1 abstained. None opposed. The room was quiet. You could hear Emma coughing faintly behind us. I turned to the one board member who didn't raise his hand, a man named Thomas. I caught his eye, and for a split second, I saw the guilt there. But he said nothing. We left that night feeling like we had walked into a courtroom where the verdict had already been written. A few days later, we received another letter, this time a formal violation notice with a $500 fine and a 14-day compliance deadline. That's when I started documenting everything, every note, every noise complaint. Every time Karen walked by our house and paused just a little too long, I installed more cameras. I backed up footage to a cloud server. I even bought a decibel meter to track the sound levels of the oxygen machine. It registered lower than a humming laptop. But the pressure didn't stop. We'd find garbage scattered on our lawn, banana peels, coffee cups. One time, even a crumpled HOA newsletter with "No More Noise" scribbled in red marker. Emma's sidewalk chalk drawings would be hosed down before morning. Our mailbox once had a flyer shoved in it with the words, "Go back to the city," written in black Sharpie. Emma saw it. She asked me what it meant. I didn't know how to explain to a child that some people hated the sound of her survival. Rachel and I began to alternate nights sleeping in Emma's room, just in case. We barely spoke anymore. We were too tired, too stretched, too afraid. Even our dog began to growl every time Karen walked past the window. We weren't living anymore. We were surviving, trapped in a home that had become a war zone. And the worst part? No one wanted to help. The HOA ignored our emails. The police said they needed more direct evidence. The neighborhood whispered and watched, but never stepped in. The oxygen tank had become a symbol, not just of Emma's condition, but of everything Karen hated. Inconvenience, vulnerability, difference. So she kept escalating. Until the night, she decided to silence it for good, and almost silenced our daughter with it, but she underestimated one thing. We weren't going to be silent anymore. After the HOA meeting and the formal violation letter, it became clear that we weren't just dealing with personal animosity, we were fighting against an entire system twisted by power. And Karen, she was at the center of it, calm, polite, and poisonous. 2 days after the fine was issued, we received another notice, this one in bold red font. Final warning. Failure to comply with HOA noise and aesthetic guidelines will result in legal action, including liens on your property. A lien? For an oxygen tank? It didn't feel real. It felt like we were living in a dystopia, where keeping your child alive was somehow a violation of community order. We hired a lawyer. Rachel found a local firm that specialized in HOA disputes, and after a long phone call, where we explained every horrifying detail, they agreed to take our case. Their lead attorney, Megan Foster, was calm but assertive. "This is a violation of federal law," she said firmly. "What they're doing isn't just unethical, it's illegal under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. Finally, someone said what we had known in our hearts all along, but even with legal support, things didn't get easier. In fact, they got worse. Karen responded to our attorney's letter not with an apology, but with a counterclaim. The HOA has received complaints of excessive machine noise beyond normal residential levels, as well as violations of visual conformity due to visible medical tubing and unauthorized electrical modifications. She was twisting everything. Our medical tubing, which fed into the house through a weather-sealed window kit, was now a visual violation. The power extension that led to a backup battery was now labeled an electrical hazard. We were no longer just a family trying to live, we were a target, and Karen was relentless. That week, someone called Child Protective Services on us. The report claimed our daughter was left unattended with unsafe equipment and exposed to hazardous conditions due to parental negligence. When the CPS worker arrived, I nearly broke down. "I'm sorry," she said, clearly uncomfortable. "We're required to follow up on every call." We invited her in, showed her Emma's medical documents, the backup systems, the oxygen monitoring. She even sat with Emma for a few minutes and smiled at the crayon drawings on the walls. Before leaving, she apologized again. "This doesn't add up," she said softly, "but I have to file a basic report, just in case." We never got proof it was Karen who made that call, but we knew. Everything felt like it was tightening. The pressure, the eyes, the whispers. Even my job started to suffer. I was missing deadlines, showing up to Zoom calls with bags under my eyes, my mind always in fight or flight mode. Meanwhile, Emma was trying so hard to pretend she didn't notice. She made jokes about Mr. Bubbles needing a lawyer and tried to cheer us up with drawings, Karen as a cartoon villain with a giant NO sign taped to her forehead. But the truth was visible in her eyes. She was scared. She didn't sleep well. She flinched every time someone knocked on the door. One night, around 11 p.m., I heard something outside. I got up quietly, slipped out the back door, and crept around the side of the house. A shadow was near our breaker panel. I shouted, and the figure bolted. They wore a hoodie, nothing distinct, but I saw the direction they ran, straight across the street, to Karen's house. That was the final straw. The next morning, I marched into the police station with my lawyer on the phone, the security footage in my hand, and fire in my voice. "This is attempted manslaughter," I said, "and I want to file formal charges." But the detective on duty shook his head. "You've got footage, yes, but it's too dark. No facial ID. We can't prove who it was." "Then investigate," I snapped. "We can open a file," he said, "but unless she confesses or you catch her in the act, we can't arrest her for this." So we installed motion sensors, a floodlight, reinforced the breaker panel. Our lawyer filed a cease and desist, and I took time off work. I wasn't letting Emma out of my sight again. Then came the town hall. It was a public hearing for local community grievances. Megan, our lawyer, recommended we share our story on the record. I stood at the podium that night with Emma's oxygen tank behind me and a photo of her hospital monitor projected on the screen. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice trembling, "this is what my daughter's oxygen levels looked like when a member of our HOA tampered with her life support system because she thought it was too loud." The room went still. I told them everything from the notes to the meetings, from the CPS call to the late-night shadow. When I finished, there was silence. Then someone clapped. Then more. Soon the whole room stood up, except for one woman seated stiffly in the back row, Karen. Her face was unreadable, but I saw her lips pressed together, her fingers curled around her purse. She was no longer in control. Her silence was no longer strength, it was fear. That moment shifted everything. News outlets picked up the story. Local reporters came knocking. Articles were published. HOA harassment nearly kills child, suburb or battleground. Disabled child targeted by HOA rules. People started speaking out. Other families who had been bullied, fined, or quietly pushed out of Willow Creek for noncompliance. Karen's perfect facade cracked. And yet, even as the world began to side with us, Karen didn't back down. She doubled down. She issued a press release claiming the HOA was being unfairly demonized and that community peace must be prioritized even in challenging medical situations. She called us combative. She called our daughter's equipment invasive. That word stuck with me. Invasive. Like a weed. Like something unwelcome. She was still trying to make Emma feel like a burden. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules, or noise, or aesthetics. This was about control. Karen couldn't stand the idea that a little girl with a medical machine could exist in her perfect little world and not ask her permission. But we were done asking, and we were just getting started. It happened on a Thursday evening. The day had been unusually hot, even for late spring. We kept the blinds closed, the AC running low to preserve power, and Emma's tank humming steadily in the background. Rachel had gone to the pharmacy to pick up Emma's new medication, and I was folding laundry, keeping one ear tuned to the sound. I always listened for the soft, steady whir of Mr. Bubbles. That hum had become more than just background noise. It was reassurance. It was safety. It was life. But around 7:14 p.m., that sound disappeared. Not all at once. It sputtered, flickered like a candle in the wind, and then silence. My first thought was power outage, but the house lights were still on. The fan was spinning. The TV in the living room was playing cartoons Emma had fallen asleep watching. I dropped the laundry and ran. Emma was in her bed, eyes closed, cheeks too pale. The oxygen mask was still wrapped gently around her nose, but the tank's indicator light was dark. Not blinking. Not breathing. Panic kicked in. I rushed to the plug. Still intact. I traced the cord back to the wall, secure. I checked the fuse box inside the hallway. Everything was green. I sprinted outside barefoot to the sub-panel we had secured with a lock just days ago. The lock was hanging open, cut clean through. The breaker for the medical outlet was flipped off. My vision tunneled. I slammed it back on and raced inside. The tank took 5 long seconds to reboot, eternal hellish seconds. I yanked off the mask, felt for a pulse. Emma was breathing but weak, shallow. The color wasn't returning. I called 911 again, for the second time in a month. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the phone. "Stay calm, sir. Help is on the way." Is your daughter breathing? Barely. I choked. Her tank was disabled again. Someone turned it off. They broke in. Rachel burst through the door minutes later, just as I was guiding Emma onto the floor for CPR readiness. She screamed when she saw her. Not words, just a scream. Primal, motherly, shattering. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes later. This time, they didn't waste time assessing, they stabilized her on site and wheeled her out fast. One of them looked me in the eye and said, "You need to press charges. This is attempted murder." Emma was admitted to the ICU. Her oxygen levels had dipped so low for so long that they needed to induce a sedated state to reduce stress on her lungs. She had bruises on her lips where the mask had pressed too tightly during her gasps. She was out cold. I sat beside her that night with her tiny hand in mine, the beeping of machines replacing the hum of Mr. Bubbles. Rachel sat in the hallway, sobbing into her knees. I didn't cry. I was too far gone for that. The next morning, the detective called. They had reviewed the external footage. This time, the camera had captured a full-body figure dressed in black, gloves on, and as they turned to leave, clear as day, a glimpse of a silver bracelet. The same one Karen wore every day. The thick, twisted band with a heart-shaped charm. The footage wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The police issued a warrant. Karen was arrested on charges of reckless endangerment, trespassing, and criminal interference with medical equipment. The news spread like wildfire. Local stations broadcast the footage. Reporters camped outside her house. Some neighbors protested. Others tried to distance themselves. But no one could deny it anymore. The HOA president had nearly killed a child over the sound of an oxygen tank. She posted bail the next day, of course, smiling tightly as she walked out in a pantsuit and sunglasses like she was the victim. When asked for comment, she said, "Only this family has exaggerated everything from the beginning. I was protecting the peace of the neighborhood. Protecting the peace. As if silence was worth a child's life." But this time, people weren't buying it. Our inbox filled with messages of support. Donations came in for Emma's medical fund. People from across the country, parents, teachers, veterans, even strangers, wrote to tell us they were outraged. One woman from Ohio sent us a note that said, "My daughter uses a CPAP. We live in constant fear of power loss. What happened to you terrifies me, and I'm praying for your little girl." I read every letter to Emma when she woke up 2 days later. She was groggy, slow to speak, but she smiled when she heard them. "Mr. Bubbles made it?" she asked, voice hoarse. "He did," I whispered, kissing her forehead, "and so did you." Karen's arrest didn't feel like victory. Not at first. We were still sitting beside Emma's hospital bed, watching her lungs rise and fall with the help of machines. The idea of consequences felt hollow when our little girl had just spent another night fighting for her life. But when the nurse came in and handed me the evening newspaper, everything shifted. There it was. Front page. HOA president arrested for disabling child's oxygen supply. Below the headline was a freeze frame from our security footage. Karen's silhouette, captured mid-turn, her signature bracelet catching the porch light. It was blurry but unmistakable. The article outlined everything. The months of harassment, the fake violation notices, the nearly fatal sabotage, and suddenly the entire country seemed to take notice. Overnight, the story exploded across social media. Twitter hashtags trended. Hashtag HOA hell, hashtag justice for Emma, hashtag Karen almost killed Rachel's phone rang constantly, reporters, advocates, lawyers, strangers offering help. We were even contacted by a national disability rights organization offering full legal support if we wanted to sue the HOA for discrimination and negligence. And for the first time, we considered it, not out of revenge, but out of protection. Karen's arrest wasn't enough, because Karen was just a symptom of something deeper, a system that allowed her behavior to fester, to escalate, and to nearly kill our child without intervention. Our attorney, Megan, called that afternoon with a plan. "I recommend we file a civil suit against both Karen Montgomery personally and the Willow Creek Estates HOA for violating the ADA, emotional distress, endangerment, and negligence. We gave her the green light. The lawsuit was filed the following week. Meanwhile, Karen's world began to crumble. She was forced to resign as HOA president. Her attorney tried to argue that she was concerned for her own health due to the noise levels and that she acted without intent to harm. But the court didn't buy it. The judge denied her motion to dismiss, citing clear evidence of malicious intent and reckless endangerment. The preliminary hearing was scheduled. Karen was officially facing criminal charges and now a very public civil suit. And while all this unfolded, Emma began to heal. She was discharged after 8 days. The day we brought her home, the entire street was silent. No Karen pacing her porch, no sideways stares, just wind in the trees and a single hand-drawn sign taped to our door. "Welcome home, Emma. You're stronger than all of them." Red heart, the Johnsons, I never even knew who the Johnsons were. But that note mattered more than any courtroom verdict. We spent the next month rebuilding, not just our home security, but our trust in it. We installed a tamper-proof generator, a triple lock on the breaker box, and redundant power backups for the tank. I became borderline paranoid, but I didn't care. I wasn't losing my daughter to paperwork and politics. We also received a letter handwritten from Thomas, the one board member who hadn't voted against us at the HOA meeting. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I was afraid of Karen, of the board, of the backlash. But no fear justifies silence when a child's life is on the line. I've since resigned from the board. If you need anything, I'm here." I appreciated it, but it reminded me how many people saw what was happening and stayed quiet. Silence wasn't neutral. Not anymore. A month later, the first court date arrived. Karen walked in with her usual airs, high heels, pressed blazer, chin tilted upward. But there was no denying the change. Her eyes darted. Her shoulders stiffened when she saw the reporters, when she saw us. We sat as a family. I held Emma's hand. Rachel sat beside her, proud and unafraid. The prosecution presented the security footage, the cut lock, the taped note from the first incident. The ADA expert outlined how the HOA had violated federal protections. A pediatric specialist testified about the trauma Emma endured, physical and emotional. Karen's defense attorney called it an unfortunate misunderstanding, claimed she flipped the wrong breaker. The judge raised an eyebrow. After previously issuing violation notices and directing harassment toward this family, are you suggesting coincidence? Karen didn't speak. She just stared straight ahead. In the end, the judge approved a full trial. That night, we got home and Emma asked, "Does this mean she goes to jail?" I paused. Maybe. But what matters is that everyone knows what she did, and no one else will ever do it again. Emma nodded. Good, because I'm not scared anymore. Neither were we. Rachel and I launched a local awareness campaign. We held a town hall on hidden harassment in suburban HOAs, inviting families with disabled children to share their stories. We found out we weren't alone. Far from it. The HOA tried to save face by electing a new board and issuing a formal apology, but it came too late. Karen was no longer a person. She was a symbol of cruelty masked as order, of silence wrapped in civility, and we were done being quiet. The day of the trial arrived under gray skies and heavy clouds, as if the universe itself had paused to witness what would unfold inside that courtroom. Our story had stretched far beyond Willow Creek by now, covered by national media, debated on podcasts, even mentioned on a few morning talk shows. But for us, it was still deeply personal. We weren't after fame. We were after accountability. Karen sat on the defense side, surrounded by her legal team, but her trademark arrogance was gone. No smug glances, no icy posture, just a woman cornered by truth. She didn't even look our way, not once throughout the entire trial. The prosecution laid it all bare. They showed the jury the surveillance footage from both incidents, first the tampered plug, then the night someone cut through our locked subpanel and shut down the breaker controlling Emma's oxygen tank. They highlighted the timeline, The prior warnings, the notes, the HOA meeting where Karen pushed through a violation vote in defiance of federal disability laws. Our lawyer brought up the ADA, specifically Title II and III, which protected individuals from discrimination and harassment in housing and public services. They cited the precedent of Loudermilk v. Best Western Inn, where failure to accommodate medical equipment was ruled a civil rights violation. Then, they played the 911 call, my voice, shaking, begging for help. The courtroom was silent. I looked at the jury. One woman wiped tears from her eyes. Emma, too young to be present for most of the trial, had written a simple letter with Rachel's help. The judge allowed me to read it aloud. Dear Judge, my name is Emma and I'm 9. My oxygen machine helps me breathe because my lungs are weak. When someone turned it off, I was scared I wouldn't wake up. I don't know why someone would do that. I just want to live in a house where I can be safe. That's all. Emma L. That letter broke whatever cold wall remained in that courtroom. Karen's defense team argued that she acted in concern for community standards, that she had no intent to harm, that she lacked awareness of the medical consequences. But the prosecutor fired back with one line that shut it all down. When someone disables life-saving medical equipment after months of documented hostility, we're not talking about ignorance. We're talking about willful malice. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty. Karen was convicted on charges of reckless endangerment, criminal interference with medical equipment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The judge sentenced her to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service at a pediatric care facility, a twist of poetic justice, and ordered restitution payments to our family for trauma and damages. But more than the sentence, the verdict meant something. It meant the system had finally looked at people like us, families with medical needs, with quiet battles, and said, you matter. Your peace matters. Your child matters. The civil case came next. The HOA scrambled to settle before it reached trial. They offered a financial package that included covering Emma's medical bills, home safety renovations, and a formal public apology, which they were court-ordered to post at the entrance of the neighborhood for 90 days. It read, we, the Board of Willow Creek Estates, HOA, formally apologize to the Lawrence family for the harassment, violations, and inexcusable negligence that endangered their daughter. This HOA failed to protect a vulnerable family. We are committed to making sure this never happens again. They also agreed to implement mandatory ADA training for all board members going forward and revise their entire HOA charter to include a medical protections clause, something Megan helped draft. It wasn't just a win for us. It was a win for every family who'd ever been told to keep it down, fit in, or take their problems elsewhere. Emma returned to her normal life, or as normal as it could be. We got her a therapy dog, a fluffy golden retriever she named Justice. The sound of Mr. Bubbles still hums in her room, but now there's no shame in it. No fear. She even began to draw again. One of her latest sketches showed a girl in a wheelchair on top of a mountain, holding a flag that read, "Still breathing." We framed it. Rachel and I still flinch when we hear certain sounds at night. Old trauma doesn't disappear easily. But we live without fear of our neighbors now. We walk Emma around the block without dread. We greet people again. And for the first time in a long, while we breathe easy. As for Karen, she sold her house. Quietly. Moved away without farewell. No one came to help her pack. No one waved goodbye. The same community she fought so hard to protect abandoned her in silence. There's a lesson in that. When you spend your life building fences to keep people out, don't be surprised when you find yourself alone behind them. It's been 6 months since the trial ended. The neighborhood is quiet now, but not the kind of oppressive, forced silence Karen used to demand. It's a natural quiet. A peaceful one. The kind that comes from safety, not suppression. We still live at 24 Willow Lane. We chose not to move. We stayed, not out of stubbornness, but out of principle. Because this is our home. And because we refuse to let hate, fear, or intimidation uproot the very life we fought so hard to protect. Emma is thriving. Her lungs are still fragile, but her spirit isn't. She's stronger now, wiser, even. There's something about surviving the unimaginable that leaves a glow in a child's eyes. A quiet bravery. She speaks at school assemblies now, talks about invisible disabilities, about being heard, about kindness. She always ends her talk with the same line. Just because you don't hear someone struggling doesn't mean they're not fighting to breathe. Sometimes I catch Rachel watching her during those speeches, tears brimming in her eyes, not out of sadness, but awe. Our little girl didn't just survive, she transformed. As for us, Rachel and I, we've grown too. We're not the same people we were before Karen knocked on our door that first day with a clipboard and a fake smile. We're louder now, not in volume, but in presence. We joined a local advocacy group for families with special needs. We've helped rewrite HOA laws statewide. We even started a nonprofit called Still Breathing, offering legal resources and emotional support to families facing discrimination over medical accommodations. Because we know how it feels to be alone. And no one should ever feel that way when fighting for their child's right to live. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven Karen. I don't lie. I haven't. Not yet. Forgiveness is complicated. It doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean excusing. And it certainly doesn't mean erasing the terror of hearing silence where breath should be. But I've let go of the hate, because I won't carry her bitterness in my heart. I've seen what it does to people. Karen tried to control everything: noise, appearances, behavior. But in the end, the only thing she truly controlled was her own downfall. And I won't follow her path. This experience didn't just teach me how broken systems can be. It taught me how resilient love is, how fierce a family becomes when one of its own is threatened, how even the smallest child attached to wires and tubes can become a lightning rod for justice. We named our story Still Breathing for a reason, because through all the fear, all the violations, all the silence imposed upon us, we kept going, we kept breathing, and we're still here. So, to anyone watching this who's been bullied, silenced, or made to feel like their existence is too inconvenient, let me tell you this: you matter. Your life is not a violation, and your voice is more powerful than you think. We didn't ask to be warriors, but when the battle came to our door, we stood, and we will never stand down again. If this story moved you, if you believe in justice, and if you want to stand with families like ours, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. HOA Denied Access. Help us raise awareness. Help us fight back, because no child should ever have to fight for their right to breathe.